Welcome to the Lancaster Patriot podcast. My name is Chris Hume, and I'm joined today by the founders of the Lancaster Patriot. First of all, Dave Stoltzfus. Jen, so good to have you in here.
Good afternoon. It's nice to be here.
Yeah, glad to have you. And Dave Stoltzfus, CEO of the Lancaster Patriot. Dave, welcome back.
Yep, thanks for having me. Always glad to be on board.
Yeah, so excited to have you both here today. And the reason for this podcast is the Lancaster Patriot is evolving yet again. Some changes are on the way, and so we wanted to take this opportunity to share them with you and have the founder in here, Dave Stoltzfus, and also Dave, to kind of give a recap of the history of the Lancaster Patriot, what caused you to start this, what brought us to this point, where we're going from here, and there's a lot to talk about. So we'll just kind of start this informal discussion on the Lancaster Patriot. Jen, why don't you just start out by sharing, you're the one who started this, the print newspaper. Originally, Lancaster Patriot was a print newspaper, and that's how it started. Why did you want to start a print newspaper in Lancaster County?
When we first started looking at the county in 2020 and 2021, we looked at the media outlets that were here and kind of what they were reporting on and how they were reporting, and it never aligned with our belief system. It always felt like they were attacking us. The stories didn't ring true. And so it was kind of an opportunity for us to look at our community and kind of return it to something that it had been in the past. There used to be two newspapers in Lancaster County. There was a morning and an evening newspaper, and one was more of a liberal type, one was more of a conservative type. And I feel like every community deserves to have that kind of a voice to, give you an even balance, a look at things from both perspectives so that people are more well educated. Yeah.
So, Dave, anything you want to add to that? I mean, from speaking with the both of you, one of the things I heard over and over again was the direction this county was going in, and still is, was a concern for you both, and the need to shine a light on what's happening in the county. I mean, right now, the big story is Amos Miller, and that's been going on for some time. Stories like that, where we see government, tyranny, where freedoms are eroded, and a lot of people don't know anything about it. I know one of the things, Jen, you told me in the past was people know the federal elections, they know who's their national senator, but they don't know what's going on in the county. They don't know what's happening here, and that's still the case, I think. Of course, you have LMP, and they cover some stuff, but there's so many things happening here in the county under the radar, perhaps, especially the things that are undermining our freedoms that the local media sometimes doesn't cover. And then we'll get into this later as well, their commentary and their bias and where they're coming from. But so that was a big part of it. Dave, I know you've been involved from the beginning. Just share a little bit of why you thought it was important to be involved in this effort at all. Why be involved in trying to counter the liberal, really fake media? We have stories we can tell of the lies LMP has printed.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
But just give your take on. I know Jen started it, but you were there from the beginning too.
Absolutely.
I was there. I was there when the Southern Poverty Law Center attacked us. I was there when LMP was writing the hateful stuff. I was the one that was double checking the locks on the front doors, not knowing what's going on when this whole thing went down. And it's been a long road. I did support her. I do support her. It was one of those things where we said, let's give it a shot. And unfortunately, people want their news from a conservative slant and not from a Christian slant. And in most people's minds, even Christians, they will tell us that they don't want the Christian bias. And I'm sure we'll touch on this later, how every news source has a bias. And that's one thing we were clear about in the beginning, that, yeah, we have a bias. Does it really matter? Because LMP has a bias. Every single news organization in the entire world has a bias. So, I was there. I was there from the beginning. And it is what it is. We saw a lot of a lot of crazy stuff over the last 3 years.
Yeah.
We really have.
Yeah, and I think we'll be able to cover some of that crazy stuff, and we'll get into the bias. But let's start out by staying in the beginning here. Print newspaper. You wanted to provide coverage of the local news first and foremost, but also you'd have the state and national. But what's happening in Lancaster County? What's going on, down at the township where they're voting to increase your stormwater fee and all these regulations and all these things? And you wanted people to be able to get that information and then be able to act on it, right? To be able to express their voice and call out these bureaucrats, these politicians, and hold them to a higher standard. Now, from the beginning, you had commentary in there, and it was explicitly Christian commentary. And we're going to run into that later, this issue with one of the groups that really, to this day, isn't a fan of what we're doing, is the establishment GOP, the Republican leaders in this county. And we can get into some of that. But before we do all that, how long did the print go? About 2 years the print newspaper ran, roughly. Now, what were some of the challenges to the print newspaper? Before we even get into, it'll probably overlap some things with just, in general, a media arm, a media brand that's bringing a biblical worldview to bear on things. But even just the print newspaper here in Lancaster County, some people might say, well, here's a great place it could work. You have the Amish community. You have exactly. A lot of conservatives. This print newspaper should take off. Obviously, I think you've told me, maybe you could have done some things better. But what were the challenges that you faced? And I think there were a few we were talking about, both just because of the general market, and then also there were people or groups, I should say, that were really trying to prevent you from succeeding. So start wherever you'd like on some of the challenges that you faced in starting and then trying to get a print newspaper to be successful here in Lancaster County.
Go ahead.
You want me to do that? Oh, man. Where do you start? Probably some of the bigger challenges, I would say, was advertising. People were scared to advertise. When we got started, most people, you can Google the whole fiasco where we got started, and you can believe whether you want to believe them or believe our statements. That's completely up to you. We understand that our statements are biased, their statements are biased. However, ours are really what happened. Go back and look them up. So I would encourage you to do that. At the same time, we started out on the wrong foot, and so people were really concerned about advertising with us. Obituaries, people, were not, these funeral homes were not interested. Legals, let's face it, legals is one of the biggest things in a newspaper. LMP charges an outrageous $1 per inch.
And by the way, side note here, it probably shouldn't be, but it's a government regulation that forces them in there.
Yeah,
and so
absolutely.
The newspaper provides the service, but I don't know if you want to get into that now with LMP, because yes, legals are a big source of revenue for LMP. And of course, the Lancaster Patriot wanted to offer that to people if they wanted to choose another newspaper. They're free not to. But I don't know if you want to share that now, that was a challenge right there that we ran into. As when we had the print newspaper, there were townships that wanted to run their legal notices with the Lancaster Patriot, and they didn't. Why didn't they?
Lawsuits. LMP threatened a lawsuit. LMP sent their lawyers after the one township. And at the end of the day, everybody was concerned because the legal language is written in a way that it's not clear. It's lawfare, and we've discussed that multiple times on this podcast about when the legal language is not clear, or when the government intervenes, it's never clear, and that's part of the problem. But going back to your question, and I don't want to go down that rabbit trail. The challenges really were trying to start a grassroots newspaper, finding journalists who were
passionate
and good journalists. We're working off of editors who were working remotely, journalists who were working remotely. We were small, and you're talking here 2020. So this is COVID. We don't really have an office at this point. It's
I was working out of our home office.
Yeah, out of a basement, out of an office in the basement. So it just had its challenges. It really did. And Jen did a really good job, I think, of putting that newspaper together every single week. It's not something I would have done. You have to be slightly crazy to do that.
And I've heard to this day people that absolutely love the newspaper. So I think we're going to say many times throughout this episode, thank you to all of you who supported the Lancaster Patriot. Many of you still do to this day. We know some of you are not online, so you might not be hearing this, but we want to thank everybody who supported the print newspaper, who supports the online media and the commentary we have now. And those people have been faithful supporters.
Absolutely.
And that's the encouragement I think we have, that even though we have a lot of concerns where this county is going, and even with the Republican Party, which we'll touch on, there are still a lot of people in the county that believe in freedom, that believe in biblical justice, and really have been encouragement to all of us. So I want to make that clear, but I don't want to move on.
I want to go back to some of those challenges. Some of those challenges are advertising. They are funding. Everything is funding. It boils down to funding. We had some very, very good supporters out there. Some of you guys, you know who you are.
We're amazing. You're amazing.
Week in, week out, you didn't ask questions. And we understood some of you went away when we went to more of a digital platform, and we understand that. That's fine. Mm-hmm. But we really do appreciate everything you guys did. Some of you guys didn't even ask questions. You just, every quarter you send in your payment, and you re-upped it. So thank you. And I think some of those people would come back. If we could find, let's say we found 200 people in Lancaster County who were okay with a newspaper here's the problem. Can you find 200 people in Lancaster County who are okay with a newspaper that has a Christian bias? I don't know that you can. In a county with 550,000 people, heavily influenced by Anabaptists, to find 200 businesses to advertise is a problem.
Right, finding 200 business people who would say, we want to be behind this. Yeah, that was a big challenge, absolutely.
That was the number one challenge.
Yeah.
They did not want something that had a Christian bias. They wanted something that had a Republican bias.
Right. Well, we're going to get more into that, but I didn't want
come on.
I didn't want to move on from the LNP legal thing first, because I want Jen to speak on that. I'm
just saying, we could go all day here. How much time you got?
Yeah, well, I have all the time we need. So we will come back to that, because we're going to talk about commentary and things like that. But Jen, you and I, Dave, you and I met with some township supervisor people, and they were hesitant. They wanted to do legal notice with us. They were hesitant because when you say lawsuit, I just want to unpack that a little bit. And Jen, I want you to share your thoughts on this. And here you have a local newspaper company who is basically threatening lawsuits to these townships if the townships stop sending their legal notices to LNP. And
how's that not extortion?
And they're going to say that, well, Lancaster Patriot doesn't meet the guidelines of the law. So that's going to be their excuse for it. They're going to say, well, we're following the law here. Well, really, that would be up to someone else, but they're bringing the lawsuit, and it basically amounted to, what it amounted to in effect was these townships were afraid to stop sending LNP money for their legal notices and do the legal notices with us because the township might be sued by LNP. Am I right about that?
That's correct.
Anything you want to add to that?
So at one point, I did get either an email or a phone call from one of the townships that said, we voted to put our legal notices with you in our last meeting.
Yeah, they voted for it. They actually passed it.
And then they said that, LNP almost immediately, their legal team reached out to them and said, no, you can't do that. And if you do that, we're gonna hit you with a lawsuit. And I thought, well, that's absurd. Because you're not suing a township, you're suing taxpayers. And everybody that knows a local newspaper, we are very big in our community. We are for our community. We are involved in our community, and that's what we're here for, and those are taxpayers. So the fact that they threatened legal action against a township just astounded me, and I thought, well, that can't be right. And so I went down and I met with, a couple of different people from the township, and I attended a couple of their meetings, and, they wanted to work with us. We checked with our lawyers. We checked, as much as we could with, there's a statewide media association who actually drafted this law and is pushing to keep this law in effect. Actually, they're the ones that are keeping it in print rather than letting it go online, which is another discussion entirely, because people should be able to go online to look for their legal notices instead of having to subscribe to a newspaper.
You can put them online as well. It's just that by
You
law,
have to.
By law, you are required. State legislation, our overlords in Harrisburg have made it law.
Yeah.
That it
And it's
must be
very
in print.
expensive. It is a very lucrative business to put legal notices into a newspaper. And I went down there and I was just kind of blown away that they really wanted to switch over to our newspaper. We were significantly less expensive. We have a lot less overhead. We are a much smaller business. But they were afraid. They were really afraid that they were going to get sued
By LNP.
by LNP,
Right.
which to me is not a good way to do business. I don't know that I would ever wield my power in that fashion.
It's extortion.
It is.
It's straight up extortion. And we were at the meetings. I went down with Jenna. I mean, we went to a lot of these things. Like, we went to rallies, and we, people say that we were anti-Mastriana. I spoke at a Mastriana rally, things like that.
We were at a lot of his events.
We were in so many. We were in Free PA meetings. We were in Lancaster County Patriots meetings. We were in so many. We were all over. At
just
this
trying
time.
to get a feel for the government, or trying to get a feel for the community.
Trying to get our name out. Trying to be a feel. But I mean, it was crazy. We went down to that meeting, and they were now voting to withdraw and go back to. And I actually stood up and said, "Listen, you may as well, because if you're not willing to stand at this point, you may as well."
Right.
It was one of those battles where I think we were also looking to get our attorneys involved and maybe partner. And at the end of the day, I'm not sure. It just kind of fell off. Well, it fell off the earth, and then you and I met with
Some other supervisors.
with a couple other supervisors that were talking to the same township to see if
they would lead the charge.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it all fell through. But the point of that is to say there are many challenges in starting the Lancaster Patriot print newspaper, not least of which you have LNP that certainly was threatened by what you were doing. Mm-hmm. Even though as small as we were and are, it was still a threat, and that's revealing. And probably a lot of people didn't know that happened. So we have that. We have also just a general challenge of a print newspaper in a digital age. Mm-hmm. I mean, right now, LNP was gifted to this WITF, and they said, well, we'll commit to 5 years of printing. It's probably 4 years left now. So the writing's on the wall. I think LNP, I'll be surprised if LNP is printing in 5 years. But so we're dealing with that. I mean, newspapers are closing left and right across the nation, and here you are, Jen, starting a print newspaper. And so it was an uphill battle to begin with. It was a noble battle, and I think there's been a lot of good that came from it and continues to come from it. Anything else you want to share on the challenges that you faced before we shut down print, and then we can talk about the transition from print to online, and I think we'll get into more. We can do it now or then, just about the inevitable bias in media and the opposition to our commentary from conservatives, quote unquote. But open question, anything you want to add about the challenges facing a print newspaper?
I think one of the bigger challenges that we faced was how do we let people know that we're here? How do we let people in the county know that we exist? And, we played with a lot of different scenarios. We used to take, Wednesdays or Saturdays. We used to take Saturdays, and we would literally drive around the county, Dave and I and our son, and we would throw newspapers out the window into people's driveways in places that we didn't have a whole lot of coverage.
And then wait for the angry phone calls the next week from all the people, Black Lives Matters people, and all the liberals were like, "Oh, I don't want that, right? Y'all are littering. I'm going to sue you."
Yeah.
I'm saying, like,
Yeah.
I'm going to sue you for littering. I'm going to sue you for throwing this garbage in my front yard. I'm like, oh, okay, all right.
Yeah, yeah.
Lancaster County.
Yeah, it was very interesting. Some of the responses we got from that, and the biggest thing is you really can't advertise your newspaper in another newspaper, which would be obviously our first go-to. So that was something we really struggled with, and I don't know that we ever really overcame that struggle at all. Because even to this day, there are people that we talk to, and they're like, "Oh, we didn't even know you existed. We just found out about you, but you're not printing anymore." So that's really disappointing.
We still have people today who are trying to buy a print newspaper.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Yes, I still get those calls sometimes. So there's a lot of challenges there. I would also add it was a weekly paper, and people are used to the daily, and a lot of them wanted the daily right away, and we couldn't offer that to them right away. We had weekly. Again, this is very small, family-owned business, and print is very expensive as well. I'll make sure to mention that.
Unfortunately,
yeah,
that is a huge cost. Huge, massive.
And it was something we were committed to early on, working with our printing partner to support them as well, because they are a family-owned company as well. So it wasn't just us individually existing in a vacuum. There was a lot of other businesses that we worked with that, we all had a lot riding on this, and
yeah, it was
a big decision not to print anymore.
It was a big decision to start the whole thing, really. I mean, at the end of the day, it was. I think the underlying thing that people have to understand is media holds more power than you know. The media is a very powerful, I don't know if you want to call it organization. What do you call it, Chris? I mean, it's not an individual.
Medium.
A tool,
Medium.
And if you had looked at this county 20 years ago and read the liberal newspaper at that point, I think today we would probably be like, wow, they're so conservative.
Right. The liberals of 20 years ago are the conservatives today.
Yeah, and that's where we're at, and so our goal, I think the thing that most people don't understand is, why didn't you start out with being just a conservative and then start, and I had people say this when we started, you should be more conservative and not so Christian, and then drag people left. Well, right. Unfortunately, that's not going to happen. You're not going to go further right than where you started out at. It just doesn't work that way. It really doesn't.
So let's talk.
Well, I mean, it might have now. This might be one instance where it did.
Are you referring to me? I'll just say we were looking at the first print edition. Yeah. Luke Saint and John Bingaman were in the commentary sections there. So
they were.
I'll say Luke Saint is more extreme than I am. So anyway, I came in and toned it down. He only wrote one article, I think, since I started. He has been on the podcast. Obviously, I jest somewhat Luke Saint. Glad to have him on here. Great thoughts, great commentary. Well, let's talk a little bit more about that. On the commentary, on the bias, as you mentioned, Dave, there is no media source without a bias. The most dangerous ones are those who say they don't have a bias, and then you have people think, well, this is totally neutral here, and that's I think where people have been. A lot of people are appalled by LNP, but there are still some people that are like, well, this is just kind of the neutral news, and they don't have a bias. I mean, they're printing what happened, and of course we know that's not the case, and we've talked about this. I won't belabor it, but to this day, they still have not retracted their statement that people from the IRBC, the church, Independence Reformed Bible Church, had a sign that said "Burn Gays." The sign said "Born Gay," and Joel Saint was just at the Lancaster County Commissioner meeting, and it was that topic was brought up again. You again had the commissioners, criticizing LNP, from what I understand, for their reporting, quote unquote, and then Joel Saint gets up there and lets them have it again. Well, this is why you guys print lies. So someone said that there was a sign that said "Burn Gay." That's all it takes. So for LNP, that's all it takes. Someone said something happened, you just print it in the first or second paragraph, and then the damage is done, even if they retract it, which in this case, they hadn't retracted it years later. So to this day, it's probably not retracted. So
yeah, I haven't looked to see if they have retracted.
I checked like last week, I think, when Joel was at that meeting.
Hopefully they retracted it.
I'll look it up while we're talking here, but I doubt it.
But yeah, I mean, that's where we're at. There's I don't care if you're going with the Daily Wire. I don't care if you're listening to Fox News. Newsmax, OAN, or some podcaster in nowhere, Alaska, I guarantee you they have learned things, biases that they are going to incorporate into their media channel or podcast or whatever they're doing.
Right.
And we always said that we do have a bias. Mm-hmm. That was one thing that we were clear. Yeah, we have a bias. Absolutely.
And this is what it is.
You got a problem with that?
Yeah.
Okay.
Right.
And sometimes the bias just looks like what stories you cover.
Right.
You only cover one side of the story, or you only cover a certain amount of things. Well, things look rosy from one point of view, but when you look at it from the other point of view, it's not so rosy.
Yeah. There's a lot of ways that a bias comes out, obviously in the editorial section, but also, like you mentioned, in the stories you cover. I think we have tried very hard, though, in our news sections to not twist things.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
You always do have a bias, and there's no point in denying that. You know, we're going to cover and we're going to try to shed a light on things based on our worldview. But I don't think we've had some complaints about some of our articles, but never has it been what you said was not true.
Correct. I would agree with that 100%.
We employed a fact checker for almost the entire time we were in a print newspaper. And let me tell you, the hours that person racked up making sure that our stories were factual is astronomical. I mean, we used to be very fastidious about our information and making sure that it was checked and double checked and from several sources. And
even if it did come back, I mean, okay, let's double check and make sure that we are correct. I don't think we were ever dishonest. Yeah. Not to my knowledge.
I mean, there was one time where we had it was actually in the comics section. There was I think it was the history section, and it had said something about some sort of a vehicle, some sort of a car, and the information was incorrect. And somebody did write in and say, this was not correct. And I said, you know what, I'm really sorry about that. I printed a retraction in the next one, because it wasn't true.
Well, I should say we've had some errors like that. What I want to clarify is, you said this person was the owner, she's the general manager. We've had corrections like that.
Mm-hmm. Correct.
We've never had what LNP has done, where at one point, so they'll make these claims that are very serious,
correct,
that will impact people's reputation, mm-hmm, that are not, a clerical error, or, whoops, I said you lived on Main Street, he actually lives on Broad Street, like we'll print a retraction.
Yeah,
that's normal. But what LNP in the past has done, for example, they said Joel Saint was protesting outside Brian Cutler's home, which never happened, and so they did retract that, but the damage has already been done. I remember receiving letters from California saying, Joel Saint, he was at Cutler's house. They might have, in that letter, said Joel Saint was also at January 6th. All these things that aren't true. And again, LNP prints them and then retracts them later. Sometimes, as we mentioned, they haven't retracted other things. So why was that in there? Well, someone said it, this guy looked like him. That's how you,
it was a Twitter message.
Right. That's your standard for making a claim that's going to impact someone's reputation, is a Twitter message or someone said. And the same thing with this burn gays lie. It's like you're making claims that are very serious and you have no basis for them. And so that's what I meant. No one has ever come to us and said, hey, you've made this serious claim and you can't back it up. Mm-hmm. People complained about in fact, people complained about one of our stories because they thought we should have had more commentary in the article. The one story about the professor here.
Oh, Carey,
yeah,
Dr. Carey,
yeah, where the journalist wrote a nice article on it, and it was outlining what happened. And people are like, you shouldn't print this because you didn't go after him in the article. Well, we said go to page 13, you'll see the editorial. But people are so used to the news editorializing, and we did try not to do that. And you corrected me a few times, said, hey, there's too much editorial, getting slipped into the article. So I said, okay, so we worked very hard to not do that, and we haven't done it perfectly, but to make the kind of, I think it's even too generous to call them mistakes that LNP did.
Oh no, that's libelous.
Yeah,
like I still think IRBC should sue LNP a year and a half. I really do. I think they should sue.
Right. Well, that's a conversation for another time.
Well, I'm just encouraging those out there who are listening.
Yeah.
And I think LNP, I think you should be concerned. I really do think you should retract it.
Yeah, 2 years later.
I do want to make just kind of a quick comment about it. It does
And
sound
this is
like
not about LNP.
I was just going to say, it sounds like we're going after LNP,
But it's so fun.
and it's they make it easy. It just happens to be that is the other news source in our county, and what they do is they feed their information to WGAL, which is the TV station. They feed their information to the York newspapers. They feed their information to Harrisburg. So when they're printing things like this, they're not just doing damage to somebody's reputation inside the county. They're doing damage to somebody's reputation in the entire state, and they're really doing damage. They're really hurting people, and they've been doing this for a very long time because we had a significant amount of people come to us over the years and tell us what LNP has done to them and how they've changed stories, or they've called them and left messages for comment. In less than 24 hours, they're printing stories about these people, and they never even had a chance to respond to.
Oh, that has happened to us.
It's happened to us. I mean, they've contacted us, and they've asked for something very specific, and we couldn't respond to what they had asked us for. And so they just printed whatever they wanted to print. I mean, there's several stories about us that say
that's what
contacted
do,
and they never did.
They like, well, I'm going to print, at 8 o'clock tonight. It's 5 p.m. You got 3 hours to respond.
Yeah.
That's what they do. I mean, that's
that part of that is deadlines, but you know what? Part of that is bad journalism, and that's bad reporting.
well, and it's bad management because so this article can't wait till tomorrow.
Yeah. Especially in a daily newspaper. I mean, we don't have we unfortunately never had that kind of
We had some
autonomy because we were a once a week, so we had to make sure that
we had some crunch times where like we really want to get this one out this week, and then it was like, oh, we can't.
we have to hold it, and then it was too late because it was a week later, and we really couldn't do much with it. But with a daily newspaper, I feel like you have a lot more of an opportunity to print the truth.
Right.
Yeah, and yeah, it does sound like we're coming after LNP, but I mean,
I am.
they are the ones that oppose righteousness in this county. They really are.
Right. Yeah, there's no way around that.
No, they are. And so at the end of the day, and here's another thing, AP, they were part of the Associated Press, which
That's
is
something a lot of people don't know about.
Never be a part of. And
Right.
so if one of their stories starts going viral in Lancaster County, the AP will pick it, and then it goes all over.
Why wouldn't you be part of the Associated Press?
So the Associated Press is a nationwide organization that picks up stories from everywhere, and I can't remember. I mean, they're very, very liberal.
Well, I don't know.
They extremely woke.
Yeah, you
I
have
mean,
to if you're going to follow their style guidelines or
That's
whatever.
right.
You
That's right.
you don't call men. You call men women. You follow all their ridiculous things, and people read LNP and it's ridiculous.
LNP does that?
They follow the language. They follow the AP guidelines. Sure.
I haven't read an LNP.
I mean, they'll call
I haven't read
a
an
man
article
she
on it.
simply because they'll call Rachel Levine a woman, and they'll say she. So that's just, very basic stuff. They have a whole bunch of guidelines.
There's
like
a whole
that
book.
where you have.
Yeah, I think it was like an inch
It's a
thick.
really thick book that
you
you
got
have
to follow all these social things, and of course we would never do that. So
Yeah, there was a lot of things that kind of discredited us in the beginning because we were independent and we wanted to be able to print the truth, and we didn't want to have to be bound by certain ways of doing things just because somebody else decided that was the way it needed to be done. And that kind of limited us on what organizations we could be a part of.
Right. Well, that kind of brings together, this whole thing with bias and what you're trying to do in Lancaster County and what we're still trying to do. You have this big juggernaut of liberal media, and one of the perceptions is, well, Lancaster Patriot, you're pushing your agenda, you're not legitimate. And then, of course, you have LNP over here, and any number pushing their agenda big time. Their editorials.
But at least they're legitimate.
Right. At least they're legitimate. Their editorials celebrating transgenderism and abortion and all these things. And just neutral here. We're totally neutral. And from the beginning, you guys are like, no, we're not neutral. Christ is Lord. The Word of God is the standard of truth. That's what we operate on. Now, do we get it right every time? No, but that's our standard, and that's our worldview. And LNP certainly has their worldview. So let's shift a little bit here before we even get into the transition. Just a few more moments on Lancaster County. For some, I know some of our listeners are very frustrated, just as much as, at least I'll say I am, when you see the Republican Party and the direction that party is taking Lancaster County. I mean, even just right now at the whole Amos Miller thing, there's not one Republican leader that will publicly stand with Amos Miller. And we could talk about any number of situations. And so the Lancaster Patriot, you know, we've printed commentary, different sides of, you know, issues within what you might call conservatism. I mean, we've had people, you know, some people took issue with some of my critiques of Doug Mastriano. I wish they would have interacted with them more. Some people did, but a lot of people just said, "Oh, how dare you critique someone?" And we printed stuff that was very, very strongly in favor of Mastriano.
Absolutely.
So,
Yes,
you know,
and we went to Mastriano rallies. We were at least at 3 or 4 of them.
sure. So,
We ran advertising for him as well.
And I'm not saying that, you know, but they don't look at that. The
Right.
minute you wrote that one article, it's like, and these are conservative, you know, like the patriots of the. This should be the cream of the crop.
right. Now,
It's not you know the Republican leadership at the top of the ladder. These are the people that are down at the bottom trying to make change and grassroots.
yeah, well, and I think that's why some of them said, well, you know, Mastriano here was an attack on the GOP leadership. I don't know if we want to get into all that. I've
No,
already
I
addressed
really
that.
don't.
My point is the Republican platform in general in Lancaster County, that entity, that force did not like and does not like what the Lancaster Patriot was doing. Because the Lancaster Patriot, from the beginning, you were clear, Jen, we are not a Republican Party newspaper. We're not going to be pushing the party line of the Republicans. We're going to be covering, first of all, the local stories that matter. And in our commentary, we allow different, you know, guest submissions, but we're going to be bringing the biblical worldview. And if you have a problem with that, let's talk about it.
Write a commentary.
Write a commentary. You know,
And we'll publish it.
So just
Come on the podcast.
right. Still an open invitation to those. But I just wanted, before we move on to the transition away from print, and because we were already at that point doing more commentary. There was commentary from the beginning. But anything, Dave, first, you want to say with where Lancaster County is and how it's, with the GOP, it's kind of been brought together with this monolithic thing now that whatever the Republican Party says, it must be right because they're going against the left. And yet here we see statism being promoted in Lancaster County, and we have mostly Republican leaders. So what's going on here?
Yeah, I mean, Jen might be able to actually talk a little bit about the history. I know what's going on. I mean, they're trying to keep the votes, and in order to keep the votes, they're having to go farther left because the demographics in the county are changing, and you know they want to appeal to those independents and those left-leaning Republicans, and they're just doing it to stay in office. But I forget, you know, we got to go to quite a few of these meetings over the years, and we heard stories about how the Lancaster County Republican Party, the GOP, the good old party, was very fractured at one point here in the county. And you might be able to talk a little bit more about that because I think you were in on some of those.
One of the high-ranking officers in the GOP in Lancaster County.
Officers, high-ranking committeemen, whatever you want to call them.
I'm not sure what the exact title is. We were just discussing the GOP in Lancaster County and you know, kind of their successes and some struggles that they've had. And this person indicated to me that Lancaster County GOP used to be very kind of splintered. There was a lot of different opinions, a lot of different people, which makes sense. There's a lot of different conservative flavors in Lancaster County, and then you have the city, which is the way it traditionally used to be separated. But this person was very proud that they were able to unify the GOP in Lancaster County, and that was a feather in this person's hat, that they were able to bring all of them together and everybody was cohesive and they all kind of toe the same line. And what we've run into over the years is that if you don't toe that GOP line in Lancaster County, you are silenced. And, you know, I'm sure some of you remember there was a particular representative that did stick his neck out at one point on an issue, and he was censured. And because he didn't toe the line for GOP in Lancaster County, and you will be punished severely. And so with this newspaper, because we were not interested in furthering the GOP agenda, we are not a party tool. We are not here to make them feel better. We're not here to keep them in office. We were not respected in that manner. We were seen as the enemy. Which is really frustrating, because I feel very strongly that if I'm going to elect you and put you into office, I deserve to have a say in what you're doing in that office.
And you should have a newspaper critiquing you, what you're doing, because if you simply have a newspaper that's heralding, you as this Lord and Savior, what's going to make you better?
That's the thing. You need opposition, and you need to be challenged in your opinions, and you need to have other people, you need to have somebody that helps keep you straight. And it doesn't matter where you are in your life or what you're doing. You need to have somebody that challenges you to make you better. And, if you exist in a vacuum and you only have other people telling you, you're doing a great job, and patting you on the back, then how are you ever going to get any better? How are you ever going to do better? How are you ever going to do anything different? We're continuing down this path of statism and more laws and more, ways to control the people. Well, why?
Right.
And I think you want a good business plan? Start a Republican newspaper.
Absolutely.
Get all the
you would
deep pockets.
You could have deep pockets. You would have so much money. I mean, you want a newspaper in Lancaster County. Start a Republican newspaper, and you will have no problem staying in business.
Yeah.
I'm dead serious.
Go to Ryan Almond. Go to Brian Cutler. Go to their supporters.
Yeah,
say, hey, we will
rub their backs, pat them on the back, give them, give them foot rubs, whatever you got to do. I mean, you're gonna get money.
Oh yeah, big time. But I just want to bring it up. I know I'm trying to get most of the thoughts from you, but that's a very important point, Jen. That the point of the media is to hold. One of the main points is to hold these elected people accountable.
That's what it was. It was the fourth arm.
Wasn't that?
It was the fourth arm of government.
John Adams.
I forget who
I believe John Adams or one of our founding
Jefferson
fathers.
said something about it too. That without a free press, you have tyranny.
Yep.
But part of that is covering the stories. Part of that is the commentary and the editorials. And one of the points I've made many times, because some people were bothered. Well, hey, you're criticizing the Republicans. Well, what I've always said is the LNP and the liberals, they're going to have no critiques for the GOP that has any meaning or any substance. No. So we should want people out there that are going to critique the Republicans from a biblical worldview and say, just because you're a Republican and opposing the left, does that mean what you're doing is right? And it can't always mean that. So we should be able to critique them. And from what other worldview would you want that critique come than from the biblical one? And that, I know that has resonated with a lot of our supporters and listeners, but that's where we were coming from. I mean, that was the vision of the commentary side. So anything else you want to?
Yeah, I remember having a conversation with a gentleman, it had to be 2 years ago, who said, you guys need to bash Biden and the Democrats and, Ishmael Wade and these crazy people, these Democrats and these liberals.
Diane.
Like, why? Why? They're already out in left field.
Right, because that's what people want to hear.
But why? What is wrong with you people? You can critique them all you want, and even if they come back to middle, what good have you done?
Where's their moral compass?
You're just what, slowing the train down before it goes over the cliff? Is that what you're trying to do?
I don't think it's even that. I think it's just people want that rage. They want an outlet for that rage. Blame it on the left, and then the Republicans keep taking us slower into statism instead of actually deeply thinking about, hey, how should we deal with this? What are the answers? What are the biblical solutions? How can we critique, Mastriano or Dave Zimmerman? Oh no, you don't do that, because they're our only hope against the left, and it's not taking us to a good place.
No, it hasn't. But I mean, that's really where Lancaster County is. It's a world of support the GOP or and become a talking piece to them if you want to be a good rag.
Yeah.
And I remember we struggled at different times making sure that the news was news and the commentary was commentary. When we were reporting on some of the inappropriate reading material in libraries and schools, You know, we were reporting on what people were finding and things like that, and we weren't seeing the community step up and do anything. You know, the people that lived in this community were the ones that were reporting this to us, and they expected us to do a call for action for something like that. And I said, that's not what a newspaper's for. Our job is to let you know what's going on in your community so that you are educated enough to go ahead and
pull your kids out of public school
and do what needs to be done. You know,
I mean, come on.
I think
instead they're like going to the school boards and like, hey, we need to change it. How are you going to change the corrupt system?
You're gonna rehab it.
Come on, peeps.
You're gonna rehab it, just like putting people
You
in
gonna
jail.
slap some lipstick on that pig, huh?
Yeah, and
let's go for it.
That was really frustrating for me. That people were so trained that they didn't even recognize that they were being fed an opinion that they were supposed to act on. They were being told how to act by their media, and that really frustrated me.
Yeah, well, I think it was frustrating too that for some people, and again, this wasn't everybody. We have great supporters, but this is just the state of affairs. I think it's important to talk about, and that's what we always try to do on the show: is say what's going on, what's happening, what are the issues at play here. Was that people, generally speaking, kind of lost the understanding of what a newspaper is.
Absolutely.
Like you have even this idea of what are editorials and what are news articles. And that's something we tried very hard online and in the paper to be like, hey, we have our news articles and our editorials.
Yeah, to re-educate people.
And so what actually, it's ironic, the critiques on our paper, generally speaking, were that our news articles, other than a few times where I maybe went too far, but generally speaking, the biggest critiques were our news articles didn't have enough commentary, and our commentary was too hard hitting. So those were their critiques. Like, oh, why are you platforming Greg Carey when he's this flaming liberal and your article didn't say anything negative about him? You guys need to take a stance in that. And then over here, why are you allowing the managing editor to write these scathing rebukes of Republican leaders? And it's like, well, that's what the paper's supposed to be, and that's what people didn't get. And that was it's funny, but it's frustrating, and so they have this idea that, well, I don't know. And then you have LMP and their news articles are severely biased, but a lot of people don't see that. A lot of people do though. So anyway.
See, I would still love to have Mastriano on the show. Obviously he was fed some misinformation about us. I can tell you he was because
starting with the size of our organization.
Right.
But I would love Mastriano. I would love if this comes in front of you. I would love to have you on the show. It's not like
we supported you.
Yeah, I mean,
personally,
I didn't, but
I did.
But I mean, that's neither here nor there. It's
but that's the point. Isn't that the beauty of it? Like you can have different views.
Yeah, we have different views. I mean, the point of the whole thing was we wanted you to consider these things, and we want other people to consider them, not just Mastriana. That's not why we were doing this stuff.
Yeah,
right.
And people get so sorry, the language
worked up. There you go.
Over these things.
Yeah,
and I guess I can get worked up too. But
and one of the big things, very, very early on in this endeavor, I did have a very elderly gentleman say to me that what was most important to him was a quote from Dragnet, which was, I think, in the 80s or 90s, was a show on TV.
No idea.
And they said, I want the news, nothing but the news. And it was something like that. And that really stuck with me. I mean, that really, really stuck with me that he was from a generation where they did get just the news. In
I'm
my
sure
generation,
that was biased.
Perhaps it was, but our generation doesn't know any better.
Probably. I don't know.
Yeah. Well,
I really feel bad for the next generation.
Yeah.
Well, that was one of the points that you had this confusion, I would say, and our news articles didn't have enough commentary. Commentary had too much commentary instead of just embracing that and taking the challenges and interacting with it. So, go ahead.
One other challenge that we had, and most people know about this, and this is the appearance of you coming to us.
Yes, I've been nothing but a challenge to the Lancaster Patriot.
No, but we did have a second child, and so there was a switchover from things kind of 9 months, 10 months into our first year.
Well, it was January of 22.
Yeah, it was a little before
January 22.
Before a year, which in any organization is a complete change of direction and, management, editorial, editor, anything like that is going to present a huge challenge in how things go. And by July, I was completely out of the picture and unable to have be any help to anybody whatsoever. So I think that was a huge challenge for.
Well, you were pretty much out by March. I
Yeah.
mean, Chris came on board in January, and by March you were.
And even in the fall, I was not doing very well.
Basically, you threw him into the pig pen and said, "Here you go.
Have at it."
Here's a pitchfork."
Yeah. Oh, it was fun.
And I think we'd be remiss to not say that was a challenge that we faced.
Well, that was a huge challenge. But I mean, if we want to list all the challenges, a 45-minute conversation with the FBI isn't exactly a fun one either.
Yes, we did have the FBI visit us.
I mean, it's just
We were cleared.
Well, I hope we were.
We hope they didn't come back.
They never came back. I mean,
Not yet.
never got a phone call or anything. But I'm just saying, like, it was just nothing but one thing after another. Whether it's Lancaster stands up or whoever.
Yeah.
The haters calling us and the haters calling our supporters and
Right.
Threatening them.
It was just. I remember once after Chris really upset someone. I think we got a phone call saying that they're going to come burn the place down or shoot.
He said the Nazi hunters were going to come.
Oh yeah, the
get
Nazi
us or
hunters.
something.
Yeah, they were going to come get us. So I mean,
Yeah.
just
Hate mail coming in with glitters. And
hate mail coming in.
profanities. Yeah.
I mean,
In the mail.
there really were times where I would say some of the challenges were,
Are we going to be okay
yeah,
physically?
physically, you're looking over, you're watching your back. I mean, you're strapped and loaded, and you're carrying, and you're saying, I hope I don't have to shoot anybody.
Yeah.
like seriously.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just because you're a conservative newspaper? I mean, is that really where we're at? And then people want to get upset at us?
Yeah.
Right. We're the
yeah.
problem.
We're the
Yeah.
problem.
Right.
Okay, all right. Really?
I don't think I've ever physically threatened anybody in the manner in which we were physically threatened.
I hope you didn't.
I'm just saying, I don't
think it ever crossed my mind to physically threaten someone the way that we've been threatened.
If somebody has their opinion and their own way of doing things, that's great. You go ahead and you go do it. I don't agree with you. But we've lost that ability in this country.
Well, we've lost the ability for dialogue and debate, and it's just shouting at each other. And
Well, we can't even have it on the right.
right, exactly. It's
Like
so
we're
hard.
trying,
it's
we're
so
trying to get,
hard
we're trying to get people to come in here and have a conversation, and people are like, "Oh, you're too closed-minded."
Right.
Really?
Yeah.
Change my mind.
Yeah. I don't think anybody that we've had on the show would say we've been unfair. We've had some people, they're hard to come by, who disagree. We do debates. I just, disagreed with a gentleman recently and afterward I asked him, was that fair? He said, yeah, it was fair. You don't have to agree with me. I don't have to agree with you.
No. Mm-hmm.
You'll get a chance to make your point. And that's one of the things that, early on we had some of the Republican guys in here. At this point, if they're going to come in, I want to challenge them. And I'm tired of, this is just me going on a rant. I'm tired of these guys saying, oh, I'll talk to you privately about it. Yeah,
Yes.
I'll talk to you privately. I don't want to go public about this, but I'll talk privately. I don't want to hear that anymore because it's always something different in the public. I want you to come in and publicly tell people, like I want Tom Jones to come in and publicly defend why he voted for a Muslim holiday. I'd like Dave Zimmerman to come in and publicly field questions and challenges to his position on Amos Miller. I want a public, but that's
I'd like to see D'Agostino and Parsons come in and publicly state why we need to have a Buddhist or
Right.
Buddhist holiday.
right. Yeah, and
I feel like they owe it to their constituents to
Yeah.
be
They
open
all-
like
they
that
all
because
do.
LNP does not field them that kind of they pitch them softballs
yeah,
if they pitch them anything at all.
right. Okay, so those are some of the challenges to a print newspaper. It's been, I guess, almost 2 years ago, Lancaster Patriot transitioned to only online.
No, a year ago.
You're right, only a year ago.
We
Yeah.
printed in March. We
What
started in
time flies.
March, and
Yeah.
then we did last March. We
Yeah.
switched to online,
You're right. Hasn't even been a year. Okay.
and kind of the some of you are like, all right, we're what, an hour and a half into this thing, and you still haven't told us why you're on here.
Right.
So we are a year in, and part of it was okay. Let's see what happens in a year, and
Is it still necessary for us to be?
Yeah, I mean, at this point we have. It's kind of turned into a ministry, and so, yeah, that's where we are. So a year of no print, and now here we are.
Yeah. So in April, I think it'll be a year with no print, and we shifted to online, and we still were doing some news stories, and we still have done some. The latest, biggest one was the Amos Miller story, and multiple articles on that. But it was a very small company to begin with. When we ended up transitioning away from print, we did have to cut some people. I mean, it's very bare bones right now, and we shifted a lot of that energy, what we have left, to commentary and analysis. And I think the reason, at least for me, was, and you guys can speak on this, was what we saw happening in the county was you had all these events happening, things happening, the government overreach, different things, and the Christian people didn't really know how to think about it because the Christian pastors in these churches were never applying the Bible to the civil sphere. They weren't applying God's word to what's actually happening around them. They weren't applying it to Amos Miller being raided. They weren't applying it to Reuben King being arrested for selling rifles and shotguns. They weren't applying it to these things. And so this did kind of shift somewhat into a bit of a ministry thing where we bring in pastors, multiple pastors, to sit at this table and talk about what's happening locally, what's happening nationally, and try to help people think through these things. And that's kind of what it's turned into. And for a lot of people, they've really enjoyed it. But it's certainly not, at this point, a lucrative business, shall we say. It's not something that is sustainable as a business model. Perhaps it could change down the road. Perhaps, I know you're open to probably wherever the Lord leads. If there was a resurgence of interest in a print paper, hey, maybe that could happen.
I mean, LNP is going to be done printing in 4 years probably. So, I mean, there's going to be a need for a print newspaper in Lancaster County.
Right.
So, I mean, that's the way I look at it. And we have the infrastructure. Unfortunately,
and some knowledge.
Unfortunately, what's going to happen is we're not going to be GOP.
Yeah. So there'll be a new newspaper. It's going to be the GOP party newspaper.
But it's probably going to be a GOP party newspaper. Yeah. I mean, unless people come to us and say, well, hey, we're really interested in biblical worldview and news. Okay, well, hopefully you got some deep pockets. Or hopefully you have 200 or 300, businesses that are willing to support it. Right. And here's the thing. As more and more newspapers go away, things like legals, which was kind of a funny thing for us to start with. Why am I going down this rabbit trail? Well, anyhow, it was kind of a funny thing to start with. We don't support legislation making someone put illegal in a newspaper. Right. But yet we were like, well, we might as well take some of that money, I guess, if we can.
Well, we were offering a cheaper alternative to people who felt like they had to get
for the taxpayers to save some money, really.
But because it is taxpayer money ultimately.
Right. And that's another aspect, just to go all the way back to the beginning of challenges. LNP, and again, the reason we bring that up, that's who we are in the county, who the competition was. They have these groups that are funding them. It's not simply the profit from their newspaper. I mean, people need to understand that. You can read a lot of their articles and say, this journalistic work was funded by blah, blah, blah. Some nonprofit liberal group that poses as neutral when really they're pushing an antichrist, anti-freedom agenda. So that's another challenge.
What's that? Lancaster
Farming?
No, not Lancaster.
No, it's like the Lancaster
County Media Foundation or something like that.
Journalism, something.
Some foundation. I mean, they're so flaming left wing. It's insane.
Right, and so those people are paying basically LNP writers.
You actually sat down with one of their writers at one point.
Right. I think two of them at this point. I think, yeah.
And for the foundation's writers?
I think the new one who took over for the last one is also funded in part by that.
Those guys were worthless.
Well, yeah, I won't get into the details, but yeah, a lot of them. Sometimes it's my editor told me to put this in. I got to put it in.
Yeah,
and they don't have any. And you've shared stuff you've heard stuff like that as well. But yeah, I mean, we'll have to do a whole episode on LNP.
Well, this is an episode on LNP.
That's 50% of it. But so
yeah. So I kind of want to be clear that when we first started this is not something that we wanted to do. This was
What's
not
that?
The newspaper. This wasn't something that I was like, oh, you know what? I woke up one morning and I thought, I'll start a newspaper in Lancaster County. This sounds like a really good idea.
Vehemently opposed to it.
Yeah, this was definitely not a.
So you did it because you felt like there was a need for it.
The reason we did it was we felt there was absolutely a need for it, and we felt like we were in a position to be able to
fund it.
We had help funding it, and we had people that believed in what we were doing.
Well, we did have help at one point, but
we were able to.
Well,
Most of it was funded by.
Well, we did have supporters at one point, but then at the end it was a family affair. At the end, all the supporters were out, and it was us.
Right.
Yeah. Monetarily.
Monetarily.
But I really felt like every time I turned around, the Lord was pushing this on me, and you know, it's easy to sometimes just to say, well, the Lord led me in this direction. You know, the Lord wanted this or the Lord wanted that. But when the Lord really puts something in front of you, you don't just walk away from it. Mm-hmm. And that is it was such a huge challenge, and it was such a big project that even the fact that I was able to produce a newspaper every week and the astronomical amount of work and time that went into that, and I was still able to have time with my family and time with my son at that point, you know, God made all that happen. And I feel like as we've gone through time and as things have shifted and changed, the fact that this has become a ministry shouldn't be a surprise to any of us, because really it was God's in the first place. And, you know, he has brought this about in the way that it is. And, you know, where we're going, I'm very proud and I'm very excited to see where we're going. And I think it's really going to make a big change in Lancaster County, because we're already seeing some fruit from it. We're already seeing people start to question, well, why do we do things this way? Or what does the Bible say about that? You know, because we've all been taught that, I think it's in Romans, you know, what the government says is what we're supposed to do. You know, we owe allegiance. And that was what we heard during COVID, what the government told us we were supposed to do.
Romans 13.
Romans 13.
Yeah, misinterpretation of Romans 13.
Right. And so now we're saying, no, that's not what that verse means. This is what that verse means, and this is the limitation and powers that the state has, and this is the limitation that the family has, and this is the limitation that the church has, you know, and we're clearly defining those spheres, and people are starting to say, oh, well, that makes sense now to me, you know. So we've changed what we're looking at. We're not strictly a news organization anymore, but, you know, now we're more of a ministry organization. And I'm really excited to see that has been able to be a fairly smooth transition, and we've been able to, you know, to meet different needs in different times of this business.
I think at the end of the day, also one of the things that people, you know, when we did this, or when this whole thing came down, the idea, you know, goes all the way back to 2019, and it being, no, we're not going to do this. Mm-hmm. To then going through the summer of 2020, and everybody's thinking this is some kind of a Trump, you know, thing,
a political rag.
Yeah, political rag, you know, and then the rough startup that we had and shutting it back down, and then
false start.
Yeah, kind of a false start, and then Jen starting to back up. You know, at the end of the day, it boils down to, and this is a challenge I would put for anyone out there who's listening, is what kind of future are you going to leave for your children? Mm-hmm. And that was part of our driving factor, and still is our driving factor, is as the county becomes more and more tyrannical, I would say, under GOP leadership and under just whatever leadership we have here, whether it's GOP or Democrat, regulation upon regulation. You know, one of the latest ones is this another authority, the emergency, you know, the Northwest Emergency Management Authority. You know, so now we have one more authority, and you know, I don't know if you ever saw that. I did a presentation on all of the government agencies in Lancaster County. Mm. Did you see that one?
Was this at Dayspring?
Yeah, it was at Dayspring.
I might have seen it.
You know, it's insane.
Yeah,
and we're still adding them.
Right.
And there's nowhere, there's no reason to stop adding them from a GOP or from a Democrat standpoint.
Right.
And I think
more jobs.
Yeah, more government jobs. You know, it's the way of Argentina. And I think that's one of the things that for us was, can we leave this county a better place for the next generation?
So they don't have to fight these fights that are going to be 100 times worse.
But unfortunately, you know, it does appear like this fight's going to continue.
Right. So let's try to bring this in for a close here eventually. So there was a shift. I would describe the shift as, in the beginning, there was a lot of focus on the local news and the commentary. It was there, but it was a smaller part. Mm-hmm. And as time went on, and just there are a lot of factors in there. I know I'm one of them, but also the fact that we weren't able to continue the print newspaper. It was very hard to find journalists, and also all the funding issues. It ended up being, we did have resources in the commentary section. We have a lot of people in the county that care about these issues. And so we kind of shifted to being, previously we were 90% news and 10% commentary, we kind of flipped that. And so I wouldn't say anything substantially changed as far as in the worldview and what we were doing when we were doing those things. But the focus definitely, the attention and the weight went on, hey, how do we think about what's happening? And so that's kind of where we're at right now.
I think a lot of that was once Jen stepped out. I mean, my vision was more on the ministry side and the commentary side. Hers was the print.
Well, mine was local news.
Yeah, hers was local news,
Very local,
and so I think that also changed as I kind of just, busy life, got other things going on, and I think you gravitated more toward my vision.
Yeah.
Than you did Jen's vision. And I think it was one of those things. It is what it is. I mean, Jen says this was the Lord leading her into it. Well, there wasn't a whole lot of options out there. I mean, sorry to tell you, Chris, but there wasn't a whole lot of options or people that were willing. But honestly, there was no one willing to come on to a conservative Christian rag.
Right.
Yeah, but nobody's going to do that. You got to be out of your mind, which we now know you are.
Yes, that's been confirmed. But I will say too, I think you would agree with this, Jen. There were some people that really loved what we were doing, but there were also a lot of other people that didn't really care about the local news. Right? A lot of the county doesn't care about what happens locally. So we put in a lot of work, and I did too. And you're right, it wasn't my forte. Journalism, writing articles is not my strength. We put in a lot of work to some local stories. And a lot of people just, whatever. Tell me what's going on with Trump and Biden. And it's like,
no kidding.
But what's happening here in Lancaster County? And so I think there's a lot of factors there that, led us to where we are. And so I'm happy to take, as much responsibility as is right. But that's kind of where we're at. We're like, well, let's shift it. So, and that's what we've been doing. But we have another change coming with as far as, what's going to happen with the Lancaster Patriot. So you want to share anything about that, Dave?
Yeah, I mean, at this point, we are at the end of the road for the LLC. We have decided that we are going to close the offices, and Jen is going to dissolve the business.
Which, by the way, actually, we do own. It is not owned by anybody else.
Right.
We actually do own the business.
So yeah, I mean, at this point, we want to close this thing down, but we don't want to see the podcast side of it, go away. I understand you've taken another job offer, but I expect you to work 40 hours a week on your own time on the side to keep the because at this point Chris Hume is the Lancaster Patriot.
Okay.
Like
no pressure.
Yeah. That's who you are now. No, at this point, that's where we're at. As a family, we have to look at our resources. We have to look at where we want to focus our energy. And I actually, and we can talk about it, Chris. Who's going to own it? What's going to happen to it? There's a lot of decisions to make on that. But over. This is Chris' last week here with us. He starts his new job next Monday, I guess the 5th, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So he does start a new job, and so anything coming after that will be on his own dime, or own time, you could say. So it'll be interesting to see what happens. Hopefully we can, maybe I'll come on board. Maybe we can do a podcast at 4:30 in the morning, or
Sure.
It's 7 o'clock at night, or 1 a.m. or whatever, and I don't know what's going to look like.
Yeah.
Poor Joel's not going to know what to do with himself.
Yeah. Well, we'll figure out a way to. So the Lancaster Patriot brand, it will carry on for now.
That's hopefully. I mean, hopefully
that's the idea.
Hopefully you can carry that on to some degree, even if it's one post
Sporadically.
every 6 months or.
All right. Well, I'm going to try to get other people to help. I think that's one of the things people have enjoyed with the commentary and analysis and the podcasts has
Debates.
been debates, different people, you, Joel, Matt Kennitzer, Luke Saint, Travis Schmalhofer. We had Shaq on recently. So I still think there's a great need for that. And I think with the resources we have and where we're at, the Lord has led us here. The Lancaster Patriot is not completely going away for our listeners. We're going to still try to get podcasts up. We may shift our website, but it's definitely going to be a big change. It's no longer going to be, the business and things like that.
Yeah, it's no longer going to be, under any real business umbrella or anything like that.
Yeah.
It's just going to be, kind of a platform, I guess you could say.
Yeah.
There are some talks about it potentially moving to another platform, but we'll see what happens. I mean, there's really nothing at this point. At this point, it's probably just going to be the occasional posting and hopefully the 5 a.m. coffee talks maybe.
Right. So for our listeners out there, those of you who have really enjoyed I've received a lot of feedback. Just people enjoy the podcast, enjoy the interactions, enjoy the commentary. We will try to continue that. I will try to continue that, and I will try to rope Dave in as well. But it's going to be a little different. We might have a different setting. We might be at a different place. We might be doing more remote, but that's good too. We can get some debates. We like to bring people in who disagree, and so we will try to continue. I will try to continue to bring some analysis of what's happening in the county and in the nation. So, and also just thank you all for your support. I'm sure,
absolutely,
throughout this whole thing. Anything else you want to add, Jen? Any message to our listeners? People that are listening now have either been with us for a very long time or they've come on and really enjoy what we're doing. So they're faithful supporters. And, from the beginning, you've kind of said, wherever the Lord leads on this, you just want to be faithful. And we don't know what the future holds. The Lord does. But I think the three of us still here, even though we've had some differences throughout the whole thing, we're on the same page that there's work to be done in this county. And that starts in the home. Starts with mothers and fathers in the home, raising their children, and then it expands out from that, and there's still a need for us in this county, to be confronting wickedness and exposing it and making people aware of it. And so what I can do, and I'm sure each one of us will still try to do that the best we can, and see where the Lord leads. So anything else you want to add?
Talking about where the Lord's leading you, we are going to be raising another little warrior after July of this year. So we are really excited about that. And boy, we are really raising some warriors in our home. They are definitely little warriors.
Are they very destructive of your property?
My husband, very destructive of my husband. They love playing with him.
Yes.
Very rough.
So,
yeah, I mean, I don't see our children,
I mean, Jen
being passive.
Jen will probably be back in like 15, 20 years after the youngest one is, up and gone. Hopefully there's a need for, a small newspaper. Hopefully there's some investors out there that, want to see some Christian news, bias and commentary.
Right.
Yeah, I definitely have
20 years from now, we still have...
I'll try to keep it going.
For 20
keep
years.
it going for 20 years.
Yeah.
I mean, at this point, we have the infrastructure. We have everything we need. We have the blueprint. Not saying we did it right. Not saying we did it perfectly. If we would have done it perfectly, we'd be raking in the dough, I guess. But I'm just saying.
A newspaper raking in dough. That doesn't even sound possible.
Well, it is possible in Lancaster County, I think. I really do think it is possible. So
I think our eldest is very passionate about the newspaper, and he's very
he
interested.
He is a little upset that we're shutting this thing down.
Yeah.
Is he 7 years old now?
He's 6.
Okay.
Yeah, he's concerned. He's like, so the office is going away. He's like, this is bad.
You need this.
Bad news, man.
Yeah, it's it was very interesting when we were throwing newspapers. We would drive along and we'd see a house that had one of those "Love is Love" signs. And my husband and I, Dave and I, would look at that and we'd say, "Oh, we don't need to throw a newspaper there. We don't need that kind of, we don't need that phone call."
Right.
Next week. And our son said to us one time, "Mommy, why would you not throw that there?" And I'd say,
"Well, he's 4 at the time."
He was 4, yeah. And he'd say, "Why do we not need to do that?" And I thought about it and I said, well, the sign says this and that's what this means to them. And we don't want to make them mad. And he'd say, but Mommy, they need Jesus.
I still remember that. Yeah.
Oh, my heart.
That was in the southern end. That was actually in like Little Britain Township. I still remember the road we were on. It was like amidst all these Amish farms. Here's this little house on the road with like Black Lives Matter signs and love is love and the immigration sign that's in like 4 different languages. What is that one?
I don't know.
And I'm just like, yeah, well, you know what? Let's turn around and throw one in there. One in there.
So then his response was, well, let's throw them too.
Yeah. There you go.
So all that to say that, my life, our lives, Dave and mine's life right now is not really the same as it was when we first started this newspaper. I didn't have any really little children at home. So I had free time, and right now I'm in a season where I'm at home and I'm raising warriors for the Lord, and I'm doing that work, and I'm in a very different place in my life right now. But that's not to say that that doesn't last forever. Unfortunately, we don't get to raise our children forever. We raise them and then we launch them for the Lord, and hope that we did a good job, and that the Lord's going to take them where they're going to be used the most. So whether that's here at the newspaper, I don't know. And we're definitely leaving it open-ended. We're not burning any bridges. We're not doing anything that can't be undone. And like Dave said,
I imagine the Lancaster County GOP thinks we burned them.
Yeah,
well, that's a different bridge.
But I mean, Chris has nothing but a trail of burning bridges in his past.
If you're never going to cross the bridge, you might as well burn it.
So yeah, the infrastructure's here, and we have the knowledge, and were we perfect at it? Was I perfect at it? Was Chris perfect at it? No, but we tried. And this is where we are, and I don't regret what we did. We were faithful where we were, and we did the best that we could, and it's been a fun ride. It's been a crazy ride. I mean, some of the, we touched on a lot of them today, different things that have happened to us, and I could never imagine that the FBI would have my name and want to talk to me.
Right.
It's just so absurd to me. And I didn't even do anything. I started a newspaper.
Right.
That just kind of tells you where our nation's at right now, so.
Well, and it's an encouragement too. Even though we could look at it and say, "Well, this didn't work out," it failed. There's a lot of stories.
Did it really?
I don't know if it failed.
Right. I'm just saying that could be the perspective you could take.
Oh yeah.
The print newspaper was shut down. Yeah. You could say it didn't work, but I think it's an encouragement that even as small as we were, I mean, we said it jokingly when Mastriano said, "Oh, there's a newspaper with hundreds of thousands of people," and that's but there's a point there that wasn't the first time something like that was said. That when you're faithful in this little thing, and we were so small, but I think the impact was not it was not commensurate with our size. We had a bigger impact than I think we even realized for how small we were. Yeah. So you keep being faithful. And you don't know what'll happen, and make 10 men look like 1,000. I mean, there were definitely. I think there was a lot of positive that happened throughout the whole thing, and we're not done yet in Lancaster County.
No, so, and I hope that someday whoever tries this again, or the next time, or I think for those of you out there who think that the world's going to heck in a handbasket, I think you got to understand that the world is a lot better today than what it was 2,000 years ago when there was 12 scared disciples in that upper room. And Christ was their Lord and Savior was laying in a grave. They didn't know what was going to happen. And today we have millions of followers of Jesus, and the world is a much better place. Now we can look at our immediate 2023 circumstances and we can say, "Oh man, this is crazy." The rapture is going to happen tomorrow. The World Economic Forum is going to make us eat bugs. China's going to buy up all our farmland. There's going to be a civil war in 2023 because of some crazy little 1 mile stretch of the border where there's a whole charade going on. Don't even get me started. All right. At the end of the day, someday in the future, there's going to be a Christian newspaper. And I'm asking you, come talk to us. Maybe we can help you. Maybe we can give you some pointers. Mm-hmm. Maybe we can tell you where to go, because we have a lot of things that there was some crazy stuff that happened over time as we were shutting down the print, where we, okay, all of a sudden we got started with obituaries at the tail end of when we were in print. At the tail end of when we were in print, legals were, there was, a couple of gentlemen that we had met with were willing to say, okay, let's do this. So if we would have had that knowledge on day
first,
one, on the first day, when we went, before we put that first print out, and we would have had those conversations then, rather than two years into it, and we're only having those conversations at that point, it could have made a world difference.
Yeah.
So you could say that, oh, you guys didn't count your cost. You could say that we were unwise. There's a lot of things that you learn. There's a lot of things we learned as we went.
Sure. Yeah.
I mean, neither of us are media people, and so
right,
we're just a couple crazy people, that decided to, I don't know, do this thing.
Right. That's right.
So,
well, I think we'll have to wrap up. I'll give you guys one final word. I'm sure I'll be back on here. I don't know when, but maybe even this week with some more podcasts, and then we'll fit them in where we can. But I just want to say thank you to both of you for the opportunity to be part of Lancaster Patriot. And it's been very special. I think there's been some really important stories that we've been able to even get national. We've reached the nation and the world. Yeah, Amos Miller. We have some other stories that are pretty big. And it's been a privilege. So thank you, Jen. Thank you, Dave. I very much appreciate that. Thanks to all the people that supported us. Thanks to the people that worked for us. I got to give a shout out now to Tracy. She put in a lot of time here.
She did.
So, there's been
Michael Yoder.
Right. And we have, we had other people here and there. Diane wrote for a while. And so there's been a lot of people, I'm sure,
Our sports writer, Jeff Falk.
Yep.
Did a great job. I mean, he stood up against LNP.
Yeah.
Well, he was able to negotiate with them so that.
I thought LNP told him to go pound sand.
Oh, that's right. They did.
Yeah, LNP told him to go pound sand.
Okay.
Yeah, so he was a sports writer for them, and they said, man.
Yeah.
There was a lot of people who they were, just ordinary individuals who came along the way, and it was a good ride.
Yeah.
Really
and there's
was.
more that we can't mention by name. So thank you all, those who support us still, who supported us, who told other people about us, even if you couldn't afford the paper. Thank you all.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
Final word, Jen.
Wow, no pressure. Just the thank yous go, round and round, especially to Chris. You walked into a mess and you were able to kind of sort it out and make it work. And I will be forever thank you for taking my baby and bringing her here.
Okay.
I really do appreciate the work that you've done. It was not easy, I'm sure. And I want to say thank you to some of those early people who, helped support us. There was a lot of the grassroots organizations that were meeting. There was, Free PA. There was the
Lancaster County Patriots.
Lancaster County Patriot. Reopen PA was even earlier than we were. You were working with Reopen PA, Matt Ballas, in the beginning. Doing things like that. So in every one of those organizations kind of opened up, came open-armed at what we were doing. And just the opportunity to network with other people that kind of believed in the conservative side of what we were doing and wanted change for Lancaster County, I think was just a huge encouragement to me in the beginning, just having other people that kind of felt like they were in a similar fight as mine. We weren't all exactly on the same page, but boy, we were definitely in the same direction for most of it. I want to say thank you to the two ladies who did the editing for me very early on. They both struggle with health issues, and they were phenomenal at doing their editing duties and turning articles around in, a matter of days for me. The first writers, they weren't journalists. They were, I wanted people that were passionate about writing about Lancaster County. And I purposefully did that because I didn't want that corporate feel to this paper. I wanted it to be a community paper. So, the people that wrote for us very early on, they had other jobs. They had other things that they were doing. And, they wrote for us. And I am so appreciative that they were able to meet deadlines and to write about things that mattered and to be able to do that when they didn't know what they were doing either. We were all learning at the same time. And I am so appreciative of everybody that has worked with me along the way, and in those of you, customers, subscribers, that took the time to write cards or sticky notes or messages. I used to have them all over my board, on those hard days when, things weren't going so well and you've got, people calling in because you threw a newspaper in their driveway and you're littering and we're going to sue you and we're going to come find you. Being able to read those notes and say, you know what, not everybody feels that way. That made such a huge difference for me as a woman and, as a small business owner. It was an uphill battle trying to be accepted as a small business owner, but someone that wasn't willing to sacrifice what I knew was right in creating that business. It was a challenge. It really was a challenge being considered an outsider, and people were, a little worried to work with us and not sure what to expect from us in the beginning. And, it was a lot of people encouraging each other. And especially, you mentioned Tracy. I mean, Tracy and I were here, and I remember when I interviewed her, one of her biggest concerns was, well, do we have doors that lock? Am I going to be safe? And I couldn't assure her one way or the other. I said, yeah, we have doors that lock. They're glass doors. We didn't know. We didn't know what was going to happen. And, just that people came alongside of us and supported us. And I would be remiss without saying to Dave, thank you for being my soundboard and for helping me through all of this and supporting me and believing in me, and especially all the crazy ideas and, the middle of the night, hey, what do you think of, oh yeah, whatever, go back to bed. It takes a large team to make something like this work. And I think we've done
all two of us.
All two of us.
Three, really, Chris, Dan.
And I definitely want to say thank you to Joel Saint, our pastor, for really being a sounding board for us and calling a spade a spade. When something didn't sniff right to him, he wasn't afraid to say, hey, that doesn't look right to me. You guys need to rethink that. And we've got several people in our lives that we can definitely say, hey, thank you for helping keep us on the straight and narrow. Because, it would be easy to lose your way in something like this, but we've got people around us that don't let that happen.
Right.
So yeah, just a whole lot of thank yous, and hopefully we'll see you later.
Very good. That's very good. Dave, anything else you want to add at the end?
No, I mean, just stay tuned. Don't unsubscribe. If you aren't subscribed, subscribe to the YouTube channel and to the website. Hopefully there's some exciting things coming. Mm-hmm. But at this point, this is kind of where we're at. We're at the end of the road for the media organization, for the LLC, and for the Stoltzfus family as a whole.
Right. All right. Well,
but I do think there's going to be some good stuff coming.
Some very exciting changes.
Yes. So, yeah, if you have any feedback for us, anything you want to say to us, send us an email at info@thelancasterpatriot.com. We'll keep that email going. Mm-hmm. You can give your feedback. We always welcome it. We do our best to respond. Sometimes we've received a lot of feedback over the last, I know I've been here 2 years, right? And even before that, we try to get back to it. We can't always get everything, but send us your thoughts. We'll try to respond. And we thank you for listening to this. Thank you for your support over the last several years. Absolutely. And we will, the Lancaster Patriot, for now, will continue on as the name, and we will morph and see what happens here. Yep. And we'll keep going, but it's the end of the business. It's the end of some serious investment from the Stoltzfus family. And we'll see how things develop. We'll see what happens, what the needs are in the county. So, Dave, Jen, thanks for coming in. I think it was very helpful for our listeners.
Thank you, Chris. Thanks for everything you've done here.
It's my pleasure. So for more information about the Lancaster Patriot, you can go to thelancasterpatriot.com. As Dave mentioned, if you're not subscribed to the YouTube, or if you listen on Apple Podcasts, whatever your podcast app is, subscribe, leave us a review. We're going to continue to try to get more information out there, more discussions, more debates. So thank you for listening. Until next time, remember that Christ, not man, is king. So long.